Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar of 2021. We are expecting around about 50 people today, so just bear with us and we'll be starting in a minute or two. But while you're waiting, what would be really handy is if you could go on to the slido.com and put in today's code, which is hashtag LM, stands for Leaders Meets, hashtag LM, and then today's date, 17/12/21. What would be really handy is if you could go straight to that now and answer the initial questions on the survey, because our guest Ruth would like to go through those results before she presents, because that will give us some idea of the audience that we have today. So go on to slido.com, pop in hashtag LM171221, answer the survey, and then we'll get the results up in due course. My apologies, I'm having to come to you from my iPhone this morning, or now this afternoon, because my PC is playing up. So we'll just give it another minute or two before we start, and that means it does give you a chance to answer those questions if you would. Just a reminder that to end the year, we're talking about procurement, which is probably the main raison d'etre for CE's existence. So not a bad topic to finish on. We'll just, Ruth, if we may, give it another minute or two for people to come in. Often people slide in straight from another Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. It's the way of life nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thank you. We'll give it till 2 minutes past, I think, Ruth, and then we'll make a start. So we'll allow our good folk that are already with us to be on Slido answering that survey. It gives them a bit of time to do that, because the more responses we get, the more helpful it's going to be, isn't it, for you later?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's just to get a feel for what audience we have today. So
yes, indeed.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. Well, I think with it being 2 minutes past 12, we will now make a start. So for those that have just arrived, a very good afternoon to you. My name is Andrew Carpenter. Most of you know me by now. I'm Chief Executive of the Structural Timber Association of Constructing Excellence Southwest, and indeed Constructing Excellence in the Midlands. And it was the three organisations for which I'm responsible that started the ball rolling in March of last year with these weekly webinars, initially talking about COVID-19 issues. Maybe we should do that again now in view of the Omicron variant. However, we have widened the agenda substantially since we started nearly 2 years ago now. And today is the final webinar of 2021. I'm joined in terms of hosting by all my CE family of regions, together with the CIOB in the Southwest. So there's about 10 of us now bringing you these weekly webinars, which are proving very popular. We've had a total of about 4,300 different people attend these webinars over the last couple of years, and we're regularly getting around about 50 to 60 each Friday. So we thank you for your support. We're obviously doing something right. Today, as you can see on the screen, we're dealing with the top 10 issues to consider when procuring construction projects. And I'm delighted to be joined by Ruth Griffin, who is the construction partner in the construction and engineering team of Gowling, based in Birmingham. And she's asked me to point out that she's part of the transactional team when it comes to the questions later on. Just a reminder that we have got the use of Slido. I've mentioned it already, but we've got new people in the call now. So if you would go to slido.com and hashtag LM171221, which is today's date. And if you wouldn't mind answering that survey, that would be really good, because what I'm wanting to do now, please, Abraham, is have we got any results that we can actually put up? Because Ruth and I would like to go through those before she presents.
Yeah,
So
we've got 7.
We've got 7. Okay, well, let's go with what we've got. I know that only represents about a quarter of the people on.
Well, we can wait till the end if you want. Maybe wait till the end. Yeah,
Shall
let's wait to the end, and that'll be quite interesting anyway. So,
all right, okay,
yeah,
folks.
okay, that's fine. We'll give others, because I can see others are joining as well.
Answering the survey. And if you've got any questions, that's also something we'd like you to put on the Slido as well. Okay, well, without further ado, Ruth, I'm going to mute myself, turn off my video, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay,
thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. So let's get started. So yeah, my name's Ruth Griffin. I'm a partner in the construction and engineering team at Gowling WLG. I'm not the only partner, just to clarify. On my side of the team, which is non-contentious, there are 5 of us. So yes, I specialise in transactional work. We also have another part of the team, and they specialise in contentious work. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Andrew and Mark for inviting me to come along today to speak to you all. Andrew mentioned that the focus of constructing excellence is about procurement. And as we draw to the end of the year, I think people start taking stock, and I think there's a really important place to reflect back on the basics of construction and how we procure our construction projects. I think hopefully we can all appreciate that excellence is built on understanding the basics, and we don't jump in there and try and think we're experts without understanding the essentials that make up a skill set. Also, as I look back on my year in construction and engineering, and all the various pressures that we faced and coming out of the pandemic, one of the areas that I've been really busy looking at, and my team's been really busy looking at, is supporting clients who may not be familiar with construction engineering projects. Quite a lot of this is derived from the pandemic. Andrew earlier mentioned COVID. So clients are really taking a look at their assets, where they want to be in the country, whether they want to spread out a bit more, so they're taking on new premises. Other clients, they have benefited from the pandemic. They've got more money to spend, so they're having a look at investing in their properties, looking at their production facilities. And then when I advise these clients, something that's quite clear is that you do need to go back to basics. You need to take them through what they need to be thinking about before they embark on a project that may not be familiar with, that isn't part of their day job. So reflecting on that, I'm going to take you through what I think are the top 10 issues to consider when procuring a construction procurement. And there's going to be a little bit of a festive twist because Christmas is just over a week away. So let's open the first door of my advent calendar. Number 1, specialist support. So lots of my clients are experts in areas outside of construction and engineering. Their procurement teams are focused on procuring, but not necessarily procuring construction and engineering projects. So reflecting on construction engineering, as construction excellence understands, it is a specialist area where you need specialist support. So the first thing to think about when you're procuring a construction project is what specialist support you're going to need to bring in. Having open and honest, genuine conversations with your procurement team and saying, do we have the resource and expertise within the business to be able to procure a construction engineering project? Have we got the project management skills? Have we got people that could administer that contract for us? How about design? Who's going to support on the technical side of things? And dare I say it, legal expertise. In addition to that, there's also bringing in your insurance experts. So I'm not suggesting such specialists are mischievous elves, as shown on my slide, but just a flag, I don't think Santa Claus does it all on his own. He does bring in his specialists, he does have his support team. So it's very important to start at the beginning with the right team around you. So top issues 2, 3, and 4. I cover these all in one slide because they make up what I like to call the construction triangle. So as I'm sure some of you are probably aware, the triangle as a shape within construction engineering is really significant, really important in terms of structural stability when it comes to design. Dare say, well, I can't say it's not as important as the star in the Christmas story, but it is quite significant. So these are the next 3 elements to think about when procuring your construction project. So quality. What is it that the organisation wants and needs to be built? Can your project team clearly specify, set out what it needs to be delivered by its construction and engineering project? Who's going to design that specification? Who's going to draw it together? Is the specification you've got appropriate for procuring works that obtain best value for your business and best suit the organisation's objectives, desires and outcomes? What I often come across is either there's not much of a specification to begin with, or that the specification is something based on maybe more outputs. So it's something that's been taken from a different form of procurement. So understanding what it is you actually want to be built, what you want to be delivered at the end of the day, quality. Number 3 is price. So most construction projects are carried out for a fixed price. But what does need to be borne in mind is allowing for some contingencies in that. So things won't necessarily go to plan. There may be delays, and they may be delays not caused by the supplier, and they may result in increased costs. There may be unknowns in the building where you're carrying out the works, and it may be that that's something that you can't necessarily price for at the beginning. So if you're thinking about fixed price, it isn't necessarily truly a fixed price. So what's in your budget to cover those contingencies? And also there's budget, going back to number 1, for your specialist advisors. Often I'm asked to advise on a contract, and one of the first things, often I advise on a contract for clients who aren't familiar with construction projects. Have you got a contract administrator? Have you got a project manager? Have you got someone within your business or that is skilled to be able to support you on this project? Or are you going to have to appoint a third-party advisor to support you on that? And that is going to add to your budget. So also, you also need to allow for unknowns such as COVID and Brexit. Does your budget allow for that? And again, coming back to quality and specification, is your specification clear enough to avoid tenders coming back with a myriad of assumptions? And then number 4, and the third element of my construction triangle, is time. How time sensitive of your works? Do they need to be done by a set date? What happens if they're not done by that date? What remedies do you need? If you're talking about an office move, do you need to arrange for alternative accommodation to be set up? Or is it the case that if it's not done by that time, it's disaster zone? It needs to be done by then, or you need to take back the works, they need to reprogram. What does it mean for the business? So having conversations with the users as to what it means when you're carrying out that project, what impact does it have on the wider business? And again, contingencies. As you said, with price, in realistic world, you do need to allow for some unforeseen circumstances. And has that been built into your program? What risk in around of time are you as a client willing to take? So I've covered, you need specialist support, get your team set up. Then consider the construction triangle, quality, price, and time. And this element is really about engaging with the client that you're working with, your internal client. What is it we want in terms of quality, price, and time? So once you've been able to make decisions about those elements, you can start thinking about your procurement route. So I expect there's no doubt that Santa Claus has pretty much a really good idea what route he's going to take this Christmas to get all of those presents delivered on time and to all the right houses. But in construction, there are a variety of procurement routes that you could adopt. As I've said, making an informed decision about quality, price and time with the support of your specialist advisors is going to enable you to make the most effective decision about procurement. So, do you want the convenience and comfort of a full responsibility design and build on a contractor? Or are you comfortable with various parties having responsibility? So if there's a problem with the design, you'll look to your designers. If there's a problem with workmanship, you're going to look to the contractors. Are you contemplating some sort of package contracting? I'm seeing quite a lot of this at the moment. So where clients are used to, because they are familiar with that in their day-to-day work, setting up separate contracts with their suppliers. And it's not necessarily easy to transpose that to a construction and engineering remit if you are not familiar with construction and engineering, managing those sort of projects. And we've mentioned Brexit and we've mentioned the pandemic, and I'm sure we're all pretty aware on the strains on availability of materials. Is it the case that actually you need to start thinking about putting in place to procure certain materials before you can even let the works contract? How is that going to impact on the contracts down the line you're going to put into place? Or is it the case there are actual particular suppliers you would like to use? You already have them on board, so specialist suppliers for certain kit that you want to include. And that all needs to play out in what your contract then looks like. So there's lots to think about when structuring your procurement, but that all derives from the decisions that you've made about quality, time, and price. So you've got this far, and now it's time to think about form of contract. So this is often the point at which I get an email or a phone call to ask to advise on a construction and engineering project. And as I think you've picked up already, one of the first things I need to investigate with my clients is whether what other special advice they have involved, and whether they've looked at the triangle, whether they've looked at and made an informed decision about the procurement structure. And then we can move on to looking at one of the standard form contracts that are in the construction engineering sector. Now, I suspect the little boy in this picture isn't being read the JCT D&B contract, because he actually looks quite enthralled and interested in what Santa Claus is saying. So when it comes to standard forms, they can be used as they are, but as is commonplace in the market, in the construction engineering sector, they are often amended. And this is where legal advisors then come into play to support clients on whether the standard form needs to be amended, providing sets of amendments with that standard form. But it's not just about the lawyers when it comes to the contract. Within a construction and engineering project, the terms and conditions just provide a framework as to the various parties' roles and responsibilities and the allocation of risk. There's also lots of other elements that go into building up a construction and engineering contract. So thought needs to be given to how the commercial and technical elements of your contract are going to be populated. So yes, it comes back to the top 4 items identified. So this is where you can draw on the support of your specialist advisors. And this is where you need to think about, where's the pricing information? What have we agreed on price? Where's that going to sit? What is that document? What sets out the specification? Where are all those documents? What's going to go on the back of the contract to detail what you want around quality? And then we also have the programme, and tied to that is level of LADs, a remedy for delay. And it's really important. It's very likely that if you've done items 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, you'll have lots of that information already. And when it comes to putting together the contract, it will just be a case of making sure there aren't any gaps, a check and balance to make sure you have identified everything you need for that contract, so it's ready when you want to go out to tender. When I was thinking about this aspect of contract documents and trying to think of something to associate it with Father Christmas, I was very much reminded of the lyric from the song Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So he's making his list and he is checking it twice. So throughout the whole process, there's going to need to be someone within the client making sure all of the elements that make up your contract have been ticked off that list as best you can before you go out to tender. Now, insurance. So we do know that Santa Claus is pretty reliable, but not everything is necessarily going to go to plan with your project. And insurance is one of the key ways to mitigate risks that can arise on construction and engineering projects. So the contract is going to need to specify the types of insurance that need to be put in place, how the insurances are going to be structured, the level of insurance, and the basis of insurance. And that's not something that your legal team can necessarily support you with. And this is where you need to bring in your insurance advisors. I have no doubt that Santa Claus has some very good insurance advisors, and that he ensures that he's got a very robust public liability insurance in place in case something like that happens and he does get stuck in a chimney. Insurance can be a particularly challenging issue if you are procuring works in an existing structure. So, for example, if you're the tenant of a building, you're going to be heavily reliant on understanding what the landlord is willing to provide in terms of insurance protection, if anything. Also understanding from the contractor's perspective to what extent they are willing to rely on their insurances to generally take the risk of damage to a wider property. So if they're just coming in to fit out maybe one floor of an office, how is it going to look around them causing damage to the whole office building? Are we going to turn to them and say that they need to take the risk of damage to that whole building? Will their public liability withstand that? And the answer to that is going to be very much led by what your landlord is able to provide you, or if you own the building, what your own building's insurance, what protection that is able to provide. Now, I'd say in 9 out of 10 projects that I've been dealing with recently, insurance has somewhat been kicked down the can that's been kicked down the road, apologies. It's really important that insurance is thought about at the start of the project to make sure that it doesn't unnecessarily delay going out to tender or putting the contract in place. It's a tricky subject where no one seems to have the right answers except for your insurance advisors. So I think one of the key takeaways from this is please make sure you're engaging with your insurance advisors from the start, and also bring lawyers into that conversation so that we can make sure the contract terms appropriately reflect the insurance arrangements that are going to be put in place. So with that fair warning, it would be remiss of me today not to actually look at a little bit of law. So there are 2 key pieces of law that I wanted to flag today as number 9 of my key issues. So firstly, the Housing Grants, Construction and Regeneration 1996 as amended, which is often called the Construction Act. So this is a really important piece of legislation when it comes to construction engineering projects in the UK. So the intent behind the legislation is to ensure that payments are flowing through the supply chain in a construction and engineering project. So what it does is it mandates that contracts for the carrying out of construction operations include specific payment provisions. And there is, unless your construction operations are excluded, and that's quite a small set of construction engineering type projects that fall within exclusions, you cannot contract out of these payment provisions. If you don't comply with these payment provisions, it could result in the business being subject to onerous payment terms, and having to pay the supplier sums that it does not consider a due, which then may only be recoverable by dispute resolution. So you could end up in the situation when you end up having to pay your supplier for works that you do not think are adequate or in accordance with the contract. And then you then need to go to some sort of dispute resolution to recover those sums. What can be a challenge for businesses who are not used to procuring construction engineering projects is that those mandated payment terms don't accord with how the business deals with payments day to day. One example is that it's often outside of construction engineering projects, the approach that payment will not be made until a PO is raised. Now, that's not something that would necessarily sit well with the mandated provisions of the Act, because you cannot withhold payment based on something that an employer needs to do. You can't say, I'm not paying you because I haven't issued you with the PO number yet. So it's really important that businesses not familiar with construction engineering projects understand what the payment regime, the impact this could potentially have on their existing payment processes, and to then work through with their lawyers and those administering the contract to make sure that the contract has a payment process that sits well as best it can with the standard business operations and also is compliant with the Act. Part of the payment provisions also requires the issuing of various notices. So coming right back to issue number 1 and your specialist support, you need to make sure that either within the business or by appointing an experienced contract administrator, you have somebody that is able to issue those notices in line with the contract and in line with the Construction Act's requirements. Now, as well as payment, the Construction Act introduces a dispute resolution procedure called adjudication. So this gives the right to either party to a construction contract for construction operations to adjudicate at any time. You can't contract out of this either, and businesses need to be aware that this is available to your contractor as well as available to you as the procurer of the works. The reason you need to be aware is because if the relationship with the supplier doesn't go as smoothly as you would have hoped, and they do issue a notice to adjudicate, you need to deal with that really, really quickly. So this is where, if I was acting for a client on the contract, on the transactional, non-contentious side, they go into project, we all hope it's going to go well, sometimes it doesn't, and then the notice of adjudication lands, and that's where I then bring in my contentious colleague to support you on that. Now, one of the other big things in the construction market this year and over the past many years, as we all know, unfortunately coming out of Grenfell, has been a focus on health and safety, building safety. So the other piece of legislation that's important to flag as one of my top issues is the Construction Design and Management Regulations 2015, usually called CDM regulations. Businesses need to be thinking about health and safety and their obligations under the CDM regulations from the moment they start thinking about a construction engineering project. Going back to number 1, specialist support. One of the people you need to be thinking about appointing is a principal designer under the CDM regulations. Now, interestingly and positively, when I speak to clients who aren't necessarily familiar with dealing with construction projects and you flag health and safety, they are usually all over it, already on top of it and know exactly what they need to do. I think the learning point is only as soon as you start thinking about the construction project, you need to start thinking about the CDM regulations. So moving on to my last top tip. Christmas is a fantastic time for sharing with friends and family. So it may not be that we're going to see as many people as we'd hope this Christmas, but there's still lots of other people to think about at this time of year. Luckily for me, I have quite a small family, so not many third parties to manage. But for your construction project, there may be some other parties, not only you as the procurer of a project, that you need to think about. So I've mentioned a landlord, there could be funders, and there could be neighbours. So it's really important, as with insurance, to engage really early with any third parties that could have an interest in your works. Because if they have an interest in your works, that means to me your works are going to have an impact on them, and you need to cater for any concerns or requirements that the may have in your construction documents. And it's not just the third parties themselves, it will also be their advisors, their legal advisors. And the earlier you engage with them, the more likely it is you're going to have to not deal with last minute requests and changes to your construction contracts. So this always reminds me of the scenario where you diligently buy your presents for your children in November when all the toys are in stock, to find out a week before Christmas when they make their visit to Santa Claus, they want something completely different. For me, this is personal experience. I think it was about 5 days notice. Santa was told that he wanted a blue Thomas the Tank Engine dressing gown, and that's what he desperately wanted. Yes, I did get the dressing gown, so I was okay there, but that's not necessarily going to be the case when it comes to your third parties interested in your project. So that brings me to the end of my top 10 issues to consider when comparing construction projects. So if you are able to make sure that you are taking those into account when you are putting forward your construction project, I sincerely hope that you end up with a project that looks as delightful as this lovely gingerbread house. So before I finish, I've just got a couple of thanks. Obviously, thank you to Andrew and Mark, but also to some colleagues who've helped me put together this presentation and the article on which it was based. So Kathy Moore, Tina Loney, Ashley Yarwood and Lindsay Hammond. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Well, it's time to go through the survey now and maybe put some questions to you. And also, just to reference Mark, who you've mentioned a couple of times, Mark Wakeford is Joint MD of Stepnell and Vice Chair of Constructing Excellence in the Midlands. I know he's in the audience today, and it was he that recommended your good self. So we're delighted that you can be with us. So thank you for that. Now then, the opening poll. Let's go through the results and let's see what you have to say about this then, Ruth. So questions, here we go. How many responses we had? 13 responses. So experience of procurement construction engineering projects described as either novice, intermediate or experienced. And what have we got in our audience? So 54% intermediate, 46% experienced, no novices. Well, that's there you
go.
That's good.
Lots of people wanting a refresher.
Yeah,
which is fine. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really interesting to hear.
Okay, let's move on. Next question, and this is around the key issue to consider when procuring. This is interesting. So contract terms come out top, specification, program. Nothing on cost and nothing on insurance. Is that a surprise to you, Ruth?
Yeah, it is a surprise.
What would you have placed? What order would you have placed them then, for example?
And I think I would have gone for specific. It would have been the triangle: specification, cost, program, insurance, and then I can't believe I'm saying this, but contract terms last.
Oh, really?
But that's only because you can't. Your contract terms are your wrapper around your content. So your contract terms fit what you are saying around specification, program, cost, insurance. Now, it's always important to put a contract in place. But even if you haven't got a contract, a formal written contract, there's also scope to find contracts somewhere in there. This is not advocating not having a contract. It is really important. But to get a contract that does what you want it to do and appropriately reflects risk profile, you need to have been thinking about specification, program, cost and insurance.
Okay, interesting. So what's the next one then, Abraham? The issue I find most challenging to deal with when procuring and construction. So all of the above comes out top. There's a quarter saying other. It would be interesting to hear what those others might be. I mean, I can tell you that I actually put other in mine.
And what was your other then,
And
Andrew?
my other was actually culture.
Oh, good. I like that. We could have another
'cause
conversation on that. Yeah.
CE is very much about behaviors and culture. So we deal with, if you like, some of the soft issues that others don't tend to deal with, behaviors and so on.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest obstacle is the culture of construction.
Yeah.
But interesting, the program and insurance is there and cost is there, but specification doesn't feature.
Yeah. Be interesting to see whether that's because people on the webinar don't deal with spec, or whether that is easier. Or I mean, I wouldn't know where to start with the specification, Andrew. So I'd
might be interesting for any of the others out there.
Yeah, if they could let us know in the comments.
Maybe tell us in the chat box. That would be super.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. Right, next question then, please. Form of construction engineering contract I most frequently deal with. So JCT, not surprisingly, comes out on top. NEC, bespoke, none of the above. There we go. So does that surprise you?
Doesn't surprise me. No. So, which is sort of, do I say, means is comforting, because we do say it's JCT that's used most commonly, and NEC in there again, driven by, I suppose, I mean, NEC is public sector. So
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna put the cat amongst the pigeons now, because when I attend workshops, I normally drop little bombshells to provoke discussion. Yeah. And one of them is I would ban JCT.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I say that is because my experience, and this is not firsthand, but it's from viewing from afar from a CE perspective, is that JCT never produces the collaborative culture that we see as CE. And so, I mean, there is a JCT collaborative contract. It was put together by some CE members a while ago, but very infrequently used. So for me, JCT flies in the face of what we're trying to achieve, but I'm not surprised it's top, because it's the most commonly used. But I always drop that into conversation, and it normally provokes quite a storm. So no surprises there. What's next then, Abraham? Now this was the best question, look.
So I can't quite see. I need to move people around my screen so I can see.
When it comes to Christmas,
I'm stressed for C.
Have some final bits. Facing a busy weekend and all done and dusted. So only a quarter of us, not me, by the way, only a quarter of us in the audience are all done and dusted and properly prepared and planned.
I would be B.
Yeah, I'm in B.
I'm in B.
Yeah, I'm in
B.
I
wish I wasn't. I wish I could be putting my feet up for the next week, but I'm B, and I'm slightly nervous for C. So.
Right, I think what we'll do then, if you've got any questions for Ruth, please put them now in Slido. What have we got already? Let's go from the top. So can we have them one at a time, Abraham, please, just to make it slightly easier? How important is early involvement of the supply chain and a collaborative culture? That's strange. It's what I was talking about just now within the procurement process.
Yeah, I think this is all about timing what you're procuring. So I know that there've been some sessions on MMC, haven't there? And this is one that does drive early engagement of the supply chain. And something that I didn't mention, which is two-stage contracting as well. If you're really not sure what it is you want when it comes around specification, then that leans towards potentially bringing on contractors to do the two-stage contracting. It's when early involved, when are you ready to go out to the supply chain, and what are you trying to achieve from that early involvement from the supply chain? If it's something that is quite straightforward, quite simple, and you're ready to go, and it's in really good shape, I think, to go out to tender and get prices, then it all depends on how you're procuring.
Can I stop you there? Is it necessary to go out to tender? Because CE finds that actually you add about 3% to the price of a job every time you go out to tender.
That's interesting. So I wasn't aware of that.
Because at each stage you get the tender at each interface, and you get 6 people quoting for each project, and that goes right through the supply chain. We reckon it adds about 3% to the cost of a project. Sorry, it's another one of my bombshells.
Yeah, I think but I think for clients who aren't familiar, who they don't know who they're they're not familiar with the sector, so they don't know who they should be going out to. I think they need for their own internal business sign off to show that they have gone out and looked at different prices. So
yeah, I remember we had a chairman in CE Southwest who worked for a client, and he said when he goes to a quantity surveyor and asks a question about tendering, if they say, well, we'll go out to tender, he said, I've asked the wrong question. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But okay, let's go to the next question. How important is procurement on best value? They have a similar one, and not lowest price in procurement process. And this is interesting. We've had talks on the construction playbook and the value toolkit.
Yeah.
Are they embedded in client advisors? Because I don't see it myself. I don't see many client advisors using the content of the construction playbook or the value toolkit. Just wondered what your view was.
Well, I do a mix of both public sector and private sector work. I would say that not in the private sector, and that in the public sector they are aware that that's something they should be referring to. Definitely in the public sector, they understand, for them, concepts of best value and referencing those. But having looked at the construction playbook myself, it's not the easiest of documents to manage. My reflection on the construction playbook is that I agree with its content and intent, but does require a lot of resource in terms of people, time and money. I think how important is procurement on best value and not lowest? I don't think it depends which sector you're in, and I'm not sure it is necessarily fully embedded yet, but it depends which part of the public sector you're looking at and to what extent. If you've mentioned, Andrew, a collaborative approach is embedded, and culture. It's about the culture of a particular client.
I mean, just a follow-on question for that. Is it time that the construction industry constituent parts stood up and be counted? And if any client asks for a project based on lowest price, they just say, no, we don't do business that way. Walk away. I think that's the only time we're going to get change, isn't it? If we walk away from clients that behave in that manner.
Yeah, I think there is
walk
that
away
space.
From any construction advisors that actually promote lowest price. Don't work with them again.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, it depends on where you are in the sector. It's why if suppliers want to engage with employers and say, I could give you the lowest price, but I don't think you're going to get the best value out of me here, they can engage. There is whether that business itself has the strength. I'm thinking about SMEs, whether they can walk away from projects on that basis. I mean, I mentioned the Construction Act, and we know why that exists, and that is to protect the suppliers. And another aspect, and I know the construction playbook brings this in as something that I've mentioned when I've looked at that, is that we know that at the lower end of the supply chain, that is where quite a lot of the skills and the expertise sits. I think in principle, yes, it's healthy to say it's best value, not lowest price, but how realistic is that in all cases?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question. It's coming up any moment now. I'm sure it is. I know there was one there from Richard. I noted it on the long list. Oh, it's another anonymous one. Here we go. Can you please briefly outline the procedure if the employer does not receive a tender she needs, e.g. high cost? Can we negotiate with compliant bids?
Okay, so this is a public procurement question. That's not something that I deal with in my on a day-to-day basis. So is this about the public procurement regulations?
I don't know.
Yeah. The procedure to receive a tender she needs, high cost. Can we negotiate with compliant bids? So it depends what the procurement process is that you've gone under, as whether negotiation is available to you. I mean, if whoever submitted that question wants to contact me separately with a bit more detail.
Could you put something in the chat box? Let me just go through a few of the comments before we go to the next question. Jack Strickland has said that I think this is going back when we said about other factoring in the time that the procurement process takes and restricted routes to market specific to public sector. So that's one of his main obstacles, the time it takes in the process. Other obstacles here: trust, leadership, communication, collaboration are missing, and that's pretty much where I was coming from.
Yeah.
With a comment here that says average tender costs £20,000 to tendering each tendering company, and only 1 in 3 tenders are won. That seems quite a high figure to me. Some say 1 in 5 or 6. And finally, a comment, and I know this, for those who will walk away, there's always be those that are happy to walk in. It's human nature. Yes, I understand that, but I still think that we're not going to get any change unless we grow a pair, to be honest. Anyway, Richard Kachansky asks a question here, so let's do this one. Richard, by the way, is the chair of our one of our theme groups in the Southwest on quality and compliance. He says currently getting fixed prices during tendering is different. How do you persuade the client to allow for this in the contract, particularly in the public sector?
Sorry, I'm not quite clear what it means by currently getting fixed prices during tendering is.
I'm assuming that the prices that you get during tender, particularly at the moment in the last 12 months with material and labour prices.
We're talking about fluctuations.
I'm assuming that. I might be wrong,
Yeah,
Richard. If I'm wrong, say so, but I'm assuming that's what he means.
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that we have seen a change in the market, allowing for how the fact that fixed prices at the moment are really quite challenging. I know that, so I've been working in construction and engineering now for nearly 20 years. And the whole idea of a fluctuations clause was just, it didn't really, unless it was needed by the contract. But if we're talking about traditionally ones that were fixed price, and now we are seriously having to entertain fluctuations clauses because we cannot deny what the market is looking like. So I think it is, if you want to engage with your client, is explaining to them this is the sign of the market. You're going to make it very hard for your supplier to actually do this deal unless you allow them some sort of fluctuation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions, please, Abraham? Right, for public sector clients, if not tendering, how do you ensure value for money?
Yeah, so you're not tendering, so you're going out with a contractor. There are often what I'm seeing, what often the approach can be taken is if that you're looking at a target cost contract with some sharing. I think this is where NEC comes into its own, to be honest, because that encourages the collaboration between the parties. When you look at value engineering, you're constantly engaging with one another around what is the best way to procure, the best way to secure value for money. So they're the sort of things that I would be looking at and that my clients are utilising to making sure they're getting value for money.
I mean, certainly from my perspective and my experience, albeit from a CE point of view, is that over the last 20 years, where we found the best results is where the whole supply chain is engaged early.
Yeah, coming back to the first question.
Works together with a collective goal. They then put to the back of them, they're not going to get the order because it's secure. And they devote all their time and attention to actually the project needs and the client needs. And I'll give you an example. I was first introduced to this in the mid-90s. I didn't know what it was all about at the time. It's called partnering. It came in after the Latham report. And I was invited. I worked for a company called Forticrete. And we made concrete products, and we were going to be used by the MOD on a big job at Shrivenham. And I was brought in 3 years before my products were needed, which is completely unheard of, because normally I'd be invited about 6 weeks before my product was needed to keep me sort of sweet, so to speak. Anyway, brought in three years ahead and involved in the design because my products were central. And I'll give you an example. On one of the technical design meetings, I removed shelf angles from the whole project because they weren't needed, because my product was superior to what they proposed. And it removed £100,000 off the job. Now, they could have screwed me uphill and down Dale near the job, but they wouldn't have saved £100,000. And so that was my introduction to, I was secured the work 3 years before they needed it. And they got my expertise into the mix. to save money. And that was the win-win that introduced me to partnering. And I haven't changed my mind in the last 25 years that is the way forward. That's what brought me in. That's only one example, by the way. There's several others that we could give. Is that something that you see or not?
And I know I keep saying this, it comes back to the project. It's the significance of the project. I'm not seeing it, what is driving that is the need for the construction and engineering sector to be using modern methods of construction, using OSM, all of that. Whenever I am advising on that, is this needs early engagement with suppliers. This needs, and when you're doing that, and when we're talking about suppliers at that level, again, we come back to the SME level. That's a lot of commitment for them to make early on. So I think that all supports a partnering approach. I'm not seeing lots of it at the moment, but I think there will be more of it if the public sector properly adopts the construction playbook.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. We've got another question. A lot of them are anonymous today. Regarding insurance, is a commercial insurance broker likely to be able to advise on building projects, or are there specialist advisors in the sector? Okay.
So you go to your standing insurance advisor. They may have another, a bit like a law firm. So you may regularly use another part of Gowling WLG for your commercial supply contracts. And then they will get, this often happens, and they go, oh, we're going to do some construction. And my commercial team would say, that's not me, but I can recommend you construction. Start with your standing insurance advisors and say, right, I'm doing we're thinking about doing a construction and engineering project. How would you, this is what it looks like. We are also engaging these other specialist advisors, but how do you think the construction, what insurances do we need to start thinking about? Decisions we need to make. My lawyer's telling me that I need to think about X, Y, and Z. Oh, and it's an existing building.
Here's an interesting one. Somebody actually agreeing with me. That's unusual.
Yeah.
Totally agree with Andrew on the need to grow a pair on walking away from low-cost tendering. How do you suggest CE goes about educating companies on this? There you go. I'm going to put that one straight to you. I'm not going to try and answer it.
Well, I suppose with any of these things, like I've mentioned, the reason they would walk away because they're worried about losing the business. So it's understanding from them how they can, why the long-term benefits of engaging on projects where they know they can give best value. Because we know what that means. They go in low and then it just doesn't work out for them and they start losing money anyway. Yep. So it's unpicking firstly with those businesses to understand their fears and concerns that drive them to wanting low cost tendering and understanding that. So yeah, and also the other thing is always obviously really helpful is if you have people who do walk away, so mentoring businesses to say it's okay to walk away. We made an active choice to walk away from low cost tendering and we survived. And this is how we did it, and this is how we chose to do it, and these are the things you need to focus on to provide you or deal with the concerns and fears that you have.
As you get older, like I am, you can also speak more openly and honestly, and you can say controversial things without fear of retribution. Because my career is behind me now, in the words of my pantomime. Anyway,
very good Christmas theme there.
I know.
How
was the partnership secured? Is that a question for me? You reckon? About the one I gave? It must be. Yeah. So basically, it was an MOD stroke John Lang stroke HLM Architects initial partnership, and they indicated who the key supply chain players were that they wanted involved, and that's when I was invited. Thank you. Do you think frameworks are the way forward to integrate your top 10 with Andrew's focus on culture and behaviours? How about that then, Ruth?
Well, I think the top 10 should be there, whatever. This is a very any construction engineering project needs to go through the top 10. So I think what frameworks do, they can allow a focus on culture and behaviours, but the frameworks need to contain elements that drive those cultures and behaviours. So I've worked on numerous frameworks where they are just a framework where you do a mini competition out to those contractors, and you're done. The challenge with frameworks around culture and behaviour is how you motivate those cultures and behaviour. So are you going to give them, what do you give them? How do you reward them for good culture and behaviour? And there are numerous ways that you can do that. So rewarding collaboration, working together, thinking of ways that you can better procure your projects, putting that back into, so I've seen some clients, they take a percentage to put back into an R&D pot, and it's agreed that the suppliers then use that. So there's a lot of work coming out. I've just seen today that David Moses' review has come out. I'm really interested to see that. And that is one of the challenges with frameworks. If you're looking at cultures and behaviours, you can put lots in there. You can put as many words in there as you like. And it's one of the saddest things as a transactional lawyer, when you know the contract just going in the drawer. So I think, to answer that question, those 10 issues should always be dealt on any construction engineering project. If you want to be driving a change in cultures and behaviour through a framework, it's how do you reward those behaviours through the way you've set up your framework.
I wonder, Ruth, just let me put something to you. I mean, we're seeing quite a change in social behaviour, particularly with the younger generation coming through, and we're putting a lot of emphasis within CE on our G4C movement, which is Generation for Change. And I just wonder whether the young people are going to accept the culture that they see within construction going forward. You know, we've got far more emphasis now on things like health and well-being, particularly around mental health, how we treat each other, around diversity, inclusion and equality, in terms of how we treat each other again. And there's a lot more emphasis from the younger generation, which somebody of my age is having to learn, but it's within their DNA. I'm an optimist, and I actually think that culture is going to change, simply because the young people coming through will not accept the SH1T that we all had to endure going through our career. They just won't accept it. Yeah, is my view. They're having the same effect on things like net zero, aren't they? I mean, you know, it's unstoppable.
I think it's a really interesting point that you raised there, and I'm an optimist like you, Andrew, and I think you're right, because what will happen is that individuals will culture that they want to work in that reflects those desires. So companies that are focused on balance in work-life balance, where they're focused on what they do and the impact it has on the environment. So that's where the skills will be drawn to. So if the skills and expertise and talent is drawn to clients with that focus, that is where you're going to get the best output, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we had a presentation about a month ago from Rob Sargent of Stride Traclown on exactly this topic. And I can't help thinking that the industry is moving in this direction, whether we like it or not. From a CE perspective, I'm delighted. But there must be a lot of dinosaurs out there that actually quaking in their boots.
Yeah, and also individuals' interests, personal interests. So if you're thinking about young people now and how they want to progress in their education, just thinking about it now is, what degrees are they going to choose? Is there going to be a high uptake on those that can have an impact on the environment, for example? So I think that's a really valid point.
Interesting times,
interesting times, and it will be a slow mover. That's the other thing about construction engineering industry.
think the great thing is that I think COVID has shown us that we can change overnight. So we now know what we can do. So we just got to get and do it. Look, I realize we're running out of time.
Yes.
So I need to just do some wrap up stuff. First of all, you'll notice now on your screen that you've got a code. You'll notice the code has changed. So you still go to mypropass.co.uk, but the letters have changed. So it's not CE anymore. It's POAN-6457. So a little bit more of a mouthful now. But if you want a CPD certificate for the learning in the last 60 minutes, go to www.mypropass.co.uk, and the reference is POAN-6457. Don't forget also to go and fill out our exit survey on what you've heard today, because that does help us plan future presentations. We're taking a short break now. You won't be surprised to know. I think there's a little thing called Christmas coming up. So we're having a couple of weeks off. Next week we're off. It's my birthday. And then the week after we're off because it's New Year's Eve. But then we're coming back on Friday the 7th of January. We haven't got the full details of that yet, but I can tell you it's around education and future skills. So it will be another important one. Can I now thank, first of all, Ruth, for your time and your knowledge and your experience. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think if you would like to, you would be a very, very useful member of Constructing Excellence in the Midlands. And I know that was Mark's view. So if that's something you think would be of value, we'd love to have you on board, particularly on our procurement team. Also, can I thank not only for today, but for the excellent work they've done throughout the year to Howard and Abraham from Leaders Meets. You've been great. And they're so successful. We're continuing, as I say, right through next year. So we look forward to that. But most of all, can I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in today and throughout 2021. I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas, a prosperous New Year. And I look forward to seeing you all again on the 7th of January. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.